He fell asleep on an ordinary Tuesday. No storm marked the sky. No strange voices filled the air. He simply drifted off, head tilted against the worn armrest of a train he took every day, his usual ride from the city to the small town of Grelmere, where he had lived alone since his wife passed away. His name was Tom, 63, retired librarian, quiet soul, kind eyes, and a heart that had long stopped hoping for anything extraordinary. But that night, Tom didn't dream of dusty books or echoing footsteps in empty halls. He found himself standing at the edge of a vast silver lake, beneath a sky made not of clouds, but shifting memories. The water glowed softly. The air shimmered with a silence that wasn't empty, but full, waiting, alive. A small boat approached, gliding toward him without oars. In it stood a figure cloaked in midnight blue. No face, just presence. The kind that made you feel both safe and completely exposed. "You've come far," the figure said, "and yet you've just begun." Tom tried to speak, to ask where he was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, a soundless understanding filled him, like a forgotten truth returning. He stepped into the boat, and it moved, not through the lake, but through layers of light and shadow. Each moment they passed was a place, and each place was a soul. A mother whispering lullabies to her unborn child, a soldier alone in a trench, a girl laughing in the rain. "This is the tapestry," the figure said, "the web that binds every life. You are seeing what only the sleeping see, unless they are chosen." They arrived at a field with no horizon, where golden trees grew upside down, their roots reaching into the sky. Beneath one tree, Tom saw a boy with his wife's eyes. The child looked up, smiled, and said his name, Tom. Just once. But it echoed as if eternity had remembered him. Tears fell without shame. Not sorrow, something deeper. Recognition. Healing. Next, he walked through a library with endless corridors, each shelf stacked not with books but glowing orbs, memories, lives, some pulsing bright, others dim, nearly extinguished. He reached out and touched one, and lived an entire life in an instant. A baker in Florence, a widow in Seoul, a blind prophet in the hills of old Judea. And then he reached the last room, a single chair, a single mirror. In its reflection, he saw not himself, but every version of him he'd ever been. Angry Tom, patient Tom, cruel, forgiving, selfish, generous. They stood shoulder to shoulder. All his sins, all his kindness, all his chances, missed and taken. And still, the reflection did not judge. "You were never the sum of your deeds," the figure said. "You were the sum of your becoming." Tom turned, ready to ask what all of this meant. But the figure raised one hand and with a whisper like wind through pine said, "Now wake." And he did. Back on the train, same armrest, same hum of steel on tracks, but something was different. In his pocket, something heavy. He reached in and pulled out a leaf, silver, veined with light, not from any tree he'd ever seen. And etched into its surface were words in a language he didn't know, yet somehow understood. Not all dreams are born from sleep. Some are invitations. And for the first time in years, Tom smiled. Not because something strange had happened, but because something real had finally touched the deepest part of him. Tom couldn't stop staring at the leaf. It pulsed faintly with warmth in his palm like a quiet heartbeat. No one else on the train seemed to notice. The world moved around him. Businessmen reviewing their work, tired mothers rocking strollers. But he felt as if a veil still covered his senses. A veil from someplace else. That night he laid the silver leaf on his desk and sat in silence. He couldn't bring himself to turn on the lights. The darkness felt familiar now, welcoming, not empty. And then, something impossible happened. The leaf began to hum. A low vibration filled the air, and Tom watched in stunned silence as the light within the leaf began to spread. It moved across the table like spilled moonlight, forming lines, shapes, runes, maps, fragments of a world just beyond his reach. When he blinked, the room had changed. Bookshelves surrounded him, taller and grander than anything he'd seen in his earthly life. They whispered, not with voices, but with memories. Each book called to him by name, and as he opened one, he was pulled into its story. No longer dreaming, but standing inside them. He walked through a battlefield of the soul, where a man forgave the father who abandoned him. Then into a quiet chapel where a nun sat alone, choosing compassion over bitterness again and again. He witnessed lives outside of time, truths so intimate he could hardly bear them. Every story, every choice, was stitched into the same cosmic embroidery. He understood then he hadn't imagined the journey. He had been invited back. The leaf was a key, and Tom wasn't the only one. Over the following days, he found others, quiet souls like him, people who had woken from strange, luminous dreams and found something left behind. A feather, a stone, a tear that wouldn't dry. Each artifact hummed with that same otherworldly presence. They met in libraries and parks and corners of cafes drawn together by instinct. They didn't speak of miracles. They didn't need to. When they placed their items together, on old tables beneath candlelight, they would feel the doorway again. A vibration in the bones, a tug on the heart. The sense that the afterlife was not after it all, but alongside, just behind a curtain the soul could pull back if it listened deeply enough. The more time they spent together, the more Tom changed. He no longer feared death. He no longer feared life. Because he had seen it now. Not the end, but the truth beyond endings. A truth that whispered through dreams, through silver leaves and ancient mirrors, that every soul is part of a song, that the story never ends, and that sometimes, just sometimes in the dream is the moment you finally wake up. Tom returned home, not just awake, but awakened. He didn't need to tell anyone what he had seen. He didn't need to prove it. The leaf with its silver veins and the markings in a language older than time were no longer evidence. They were reminders of something he'd always known, somewhere deep within. What he had visited wasn't just the afterlife. It was the truth hidden behind the veil of daily existence, the blueprint of the soul's journey. A place where memories didn't fade but became doors, where pain was not punishment, but refinement, where love didn't end, it expanded. He had spoken with a younger version of himself who had never lost hope, had watched himself from past lives carry burdens with silent dignity, had seen that what he thought were meaningless decisions had once shifted entire timelines, that his loneliness wasn't a curse but a pause in a symphony still being composed. And now everything looked different. The neighbor who annoyed him, he had seen her as a child, abandoned and brave. The withering trees outside his window, he had seen them bloom on the other side. Even the ache of his late wife's absence. He had found her again, just ahead in a place where time folded in kindness. In truth, he hadn't returned from the afterlife. He had merely crossed into the greater life that runs beneath this one. That silver leaf he found in his coat pocket. It wasn't just proof. It was a message, a whisper from beyond. Keep going. You are closer than you think. Because perhaps the afterlife isn't a place we reach when we die, but something we brush against every time we choose love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, stillness over noise. And maybe dreams like Tom's come to those whose hearts are finally quiet enough to hear the invitation. To live now, as if we've already seen what matters most. To live now, like it wasn't a dream at all. Life often feels like a series of fragmented dreams, moments that don't seem to connect or make sense until one day, we find a thread that ties them all together. Just like Tom's journey, we are all on a path where each choice, each act of kindness, and each moment of peace brings us closer to the truth of who we are meant to be. Sometimes the answers we seek are not in distant futures or far-off places. They lie within the present, waiting for us to listen. Like Tom, we may not always understand our experiences at first, but if we trust in the journey and remain open to the signs around us, we may discover that what seemed like dreams were actually glimpses of a deeper reality.